I'm filing for a restraining order against my parents. The words hang in the silence of our lawyer's office. My husband David's hand tightens around mine, his thumb gently stroking my knuckles. Outside, rain patters against the window, a rhythm that somehow matches the pounding in my chest. Based on what you've told me, Mrs. Warner, you have a strong case, the lawyer says, sliding the stack of evidence across his mahogany desk. Credit card statements, text messages, social media posts, voice recordings, the complete archive of my parents' betrayal. I stare at the pile, each page a testament to years of manipulation and control. I never thought it would come to this, I whisper, more to myself than anyone else. Only 3 months ago, I was still desperately seeking their approval like I had my entire life. Now I'm legally cutting them out of mine. The lawyer leans forward. Mrs. Warner, I need to ask, are you absolutely certain this is what you want to do? I close my eyes, and in that darkness, I see my daughter Sarah's face, her eyes brimming with tears after her grandparents rejected her. I see my son Jake, too young to understand why his cousins were welcome at Thanksgiving dinner, but he wasn't. Yes, I say, my voice stronger than I expected. I've never been more certain of anything. As the lawyer begins explaining the process, my mind drifts back to where this all began, the video call that finally made me see my parents for who they truly were. Flashback 3 months earlier, it was early November, the kitchen filled with the scent of pumpkin bread baking in the oven. The kids were at the dining table, crafting paper turkeys for Thanksgiving decorations. Sarah, my 7-year-old, was carefully cutting orange and red feathers, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration. Jake, just 4, was more interested in the glitter, his small hands already sparkling with it. My phone chimed with an incoming video call from my mother, Catherine. Mom's calling, I announced, feeling that familiar flutter of anxiety I always experience before talking to her. Even at 45, successful in my career as a senior editor at a respected publishing house in New York, I still found myself regressing to that eager to please daughter whenever she called. Do you have to answer? David asked quietly, looking up from where he was helping Jake with his turkey. I nodded. It's about Thanksgiving. I should take it. I accepted the call, and my mother's face appeared on screen, perfectly coiffed gray hair framing her aristocratic features. Behind her, I could see the formal living room of their Connecticut mansion, a space that had always felt more like a museum than a home. Melissa, darling, she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of forced warmth. I'm calling about Thanksgiving dinner. My heart lifted slightly. Despite the tension that always existed between us, I still longed for these family traditions. Sarah and Jake adored their grandparents, even though Catherine and Richard had always been more reserved with them than with my brother's twins. Of course, Mom. What's the plan this year? I asked, already picturing their dining room with its elaborate table settings, the silver polished to perfection, the crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier. Well, Catherine continued, clearing her throat slightly. This year, we're doing something a bit different. It's going to be tailored more toward an educational experience, something more refined. I frowned. Oh, are you planning special activities for the children? There was a pause, just long enough to send a chill through me. Well, no, not exactly, she said, her voice dropping. A cold knot formed in my stomach. What do you mean? Catherine sighed as if she were the one being put in an uncomfortable position. Honestly, Melissa, I think it would be better if your children didn't attend this year. You're welcome to come with David, of course. The words hit me like a physical blow. Excuse me? It's just that Tyler and Kyle are at such an important developmental stage, she continued, referring to my brother Michael's 10-year-old twins. We've planned a very educational Thanksgiving with historical readings and discussions. Your children are a bit energetic. They're not exactly exemplary in their behavior. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turning white. So, just us? What about Michael and Jennifer? I asked, already knowing the answer. Michael and Jennifer are coming with the twins, she admitted. But you know how well behaved Tyler and Kyle are, Melissa. They're just quieter, more refined. It's easier to have them at the table. A wave of heat flushed through me. I felt as if the floor had suddenly been pulled out from under me. They're children, Mom, I said, my voice tight. Sarah is 7 and Jake is 4. Of course they have energy, but they're sweet and they love you. We're just trying to have a meaningful Thanksgiving, Catherine replied, her tone clipped, now irritated that I wasn't just accepting this. It's not personal, Melissa. Not personal? How could excluding my children while including my brothers not be personal? In that moment, fragments of memory flashed through my mind. Catherine and Richard attending Tyler and Kyle's piano recital, but sending a gift card when Sarah had her dance performance. The way Christmas gifts were always just a little more expensive for Michael's twins. The way my parents' eyes lit up when talking about their accomplishments, but merely nodded politely at Sarah's artwork. I can't believe this, I whispered, my heart aching with betrayal. You're actually telling me that my kids aren't welcome, but Michael's are? Oh, Melissa, don't be dramatic, Catherine sighed. It's just one dinner. We can meet on another occasion. I almost laughed at the absurdity. They wanted me there, but not the two little souls I love most in this world. I swallowed hard. No, Mom. If my children aren't welcome at this dinner, I won't be seeing you again. A long silence stretched between us. Then Catherine exhaled sharply as if I were the one being unreasonable. Suit yourself. And just like that, she hung up. I stood there staring at my phone, my breath unsteady. I could hear Sarah and Jake giggling in the dining room as they continued their craft project, completely unaware that their grandparents, the ones they spoke of with such excitement, had just cast them aside like they were somehow defective. Everything okay? David asked, coming into the kitchen, his eyes concerned. I turned to face him, struggling to keep my voice level. They don't want the kids at Thanksgiving. Just us. His expression hardened. But Michael's kids? Oh, they're still invited. My voice cracked slightly. Apparently, our children aren't exemplary enough. David's jaw tightened, a rare flash of anger crossing his usually calm features. He stopped himself, glancing toward the dining room where the children were still happily crafting. What did you tell her? That if the kids aren't welcome, neither am I. He nodded, wrapping his arms around me. Good. I leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. I'm so tired, David, I whispered. So tired of trying to be enough for them. I know, he murmured, his lips against my hair. But you've always been more than enough for us. I took a deep breath, my stomach churning with anger and grief. I'd spent my whole life trying to please my parents, desperately seeking their approval. When I was a child, it was getting perfect grades. In college, it was graduating with honors while working part-time to help with expenses they could have easily covered. As an adult, it was achieving career success while maintaining the proper family image they expected. But at what cost? And if I let them get away with this, if I continued my relationship with them while they rejected my children, what kind of mother would I be? No, I wasn't doing this anymore. They had made their choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. Flashback of my childhood. That night, after we put the kids to bed, I sat on our bedroom balcony, wrapped in a blanket against the November chill. The stars were bright over our Connecticut suburban home, a sight that always brought me back to my childhood in Illinois. Penny, for your thoughts? David asked, settling into the chair beside me. I smiled faintly. Just thinking about my parents. Trying to understand. David waited patiently as I gathered my thoughts. After 15 years of marriage, he knew when to push and when to simply be present. You know, my dad was already a successful investment banker when I was born, I began. We lived in this beautiful house in a prestigious neighborhood. Everything looked perfect from the outside. I took a sip of my tea, the warmth spreading through my fingers. But inside, everything had to be perfect too. My mother was the principal of a private academy, and our home was run with the same rigid standards. Homework had to be done immediately after school. Piano practice was non-negotiable. My clothes were always pressed, my hair always neatly braided. David nodded. He'd heard pieces of this before, but never the whole story. What I remember most, though, is how different it was when Michael succeeded versus when I did. When he got an A, there was celebration. When I got an A, it was expected. When he won a debate competition, Dad took him to a baseball game. When I won the state writing contest, Mom said it was nice and reminded me to study for my math test. I paused, memories washing over me, standing outside my father's study, report card in hand, hearing him praise Michael's B plus in calculus while my straight A's went unmentioned. My mother correcting my posture at dinner while smiling indulgently at Michael's jokes. I worked so hard to please them, I continued, my voice barely audible. I thought if I just achieved enough, they'd be proud of me the way they were proud of him. If I got the scholarship to Columbia, if I graduated summa cum laude, if I became an editor at a prestigious publishing house. But it was never enough. David reached over and took my hand. And now they're doing the same thing to our children. I nodded, a tear slipping down my cheek. The difference is, I won't let them. Sarah and Jake deserve better than to grow up feeling the way I did, like they're somehow less worthy of love. Do you know why they favor Michael so much? David asked gently. I stared up at the stars. I've thought about it a lot. I think. I think Michael was always more malleable. He became exactly what they wanted, the successful lawyer, married to a socially connected wife, producing well-behaved children who perform on cue. He never questioned their values or expectations. And you did? I smiled sadly. Not directly, but I chose publishing instead of law or medicine. I married an architect who actually loves his work rather than a corporate executive for social connections. And worst of all, I'm raising children who are allowed to be children, messy, creative, sometimes loud, but always authentically themselves. David squeezed my hand. You're breaking the cycle. Trying to, I whispered. But it hurts, David. It still hurts so much to know that after all these years, they still see us, as somehow deficient. Their loss, he said firmly. We have a beautiful family, Mel. And your parents? They're missing out on knowing two incredible kids because they're too rigid to see past their own narrow expectations. As we sat there beneath the stars, I felt something shift inside me. The pain was still there, but alongside it was a growing resolve. I'd spent decades seeking approval I would never receive. It was time to stop. At home the next morning, I woke to a text from my brother Michael. Mom says you're ruining Thanksgiving. Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic? I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening, feeling my pulse quicken. Of course she had already run to him. I typed back, oh, she uninvited my children but said your twins are invited. Interesting definition of dramatic. The typing bubbles appeared, then stopped. Several minutes passed before he finally responded. She just wants an educational environment, Melissa. You know how your kids aren't exactly role models. Role models? As if my children were somehow deficient. Something to be fixed rather than celebrated? Something inside me snapped. Enjoy your perfect Thanksgiving, Michael. We won't be there. I turned off my phone before he could respond. They didn't want me or my children at their table? Fine. I wouldn't be part of their world at all, and they were about to find out what that really meant. For years, I had been the reliable one, the one who always helped when they needed something. When my parents needed someone to pick up their prescriptions, they called me. When their Wi-Fi stopped working, I was the one who drove over to fix it. When they wanted help organizing a family gathering, I was the one stuck making calls and running errands. And Michael? He got to be the golden child, doing the bare minimum while reaping all the rewards. But if I wasn't part of their preferred family, then they weren't going to benefit from me anymore. I shared my decision with David over breakfast after the kids had left for the kitchen table to eat their cereal. I'm cutting them off, I said quietly. Not just Thanksgiving. Everything. David studied me carefully. You're sure? I nodded. They've been using me my entire life, David. And now they've made it clear that our children aren't good enough for them. I'm done. He reached across the table and took my hand. Whatever you decide, I support you. But are you ready for the backlash? You know they won't just accept this. I thought of all the times I'd swallowed my hurt for the sake of peace. All the times I'd made excuses for their behavior. I'm ready, I said firmly. They need me more than I need them. It's time they realize that. Black Friday, the credit card incident. The mall was packed with Black Friday shoppers, a sea of bodies clutching bags and searching for deals. I hadn't planned to participate in the shopping frenzy, but Sarah had outgrown her winter coat, and the sales were too good to pass up. Can we get hot chocolate after? Jake asked, his small hand clutched in mine as we navigated through the crowd. Absolutely, I promised, steering us toward the children's department. After finding a perfect purple coat for Sarah and a blue one for Jake, we headed to the checkout. The line snaked through the department, but the kids were being remarkably patient, playing a quiet game of I Spy as we waited. When we finally reached the register, I handed over my credit card, my mind already on the promised hot chocolate. But instead of completing the transaction, the cashier frowned at the terminal. I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card has been declined. I blinked in surprise. That can't be right. Could you try again? She did, with the same result. It says you've reached your credit limit. My face flushed with embarrassment. That's impossible. I pay off my balance every month. I pulled out my phone to check my banking app, and as the transactions loaded, my stomach dropped. There were dozens of charges I didn't recognize. Restaurants in Boston I'd never visited, a spa treatment at an exclusive salon, electronic stores, and the most recent, a $3,500 charge for a massage chair. A cold realization crawled up my spine. 6 months ago, when my father retired from his investment banking position, they had experienced what they called a temporary cash flow issue during the transition to his pension. I had temporarily added them as authorized users on my credit card to help them get through what I thought was a difficult time. I had intended to remove them once their situation stabilized, but life got busy and I had forgotten. Mom, is everything okay? Sarah asked, her new coat clutched to her chest, eyes wide with concern. I forced a smile. Just a mix-up, honey. Let me use a different card. I paid with my debit card, my mind racing. As soon as we were out of the store, I found a bench and sat down, pulling out my phone again to examine the charges more closely. The total unauthorized spending over the past 6 months was more than $12,000. Kids, change of plans, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to make a quick stop at the bank before hot chocolate. At the bank, I closed my credit card account and initiated a fraud investigation. Then, heart pounding, I called my mother. Can you explain the charges on my credit card? I asked without preamble when she answered. Catherine scoffed. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Melissa. It's just a card. You earn a good salary. And we thought, what did you think? My voice was trembling now, my face burning with anger. Were you just planning to keep using my money? Did you think I wouldn't notice? Don't act like this is some big betrayal, she said dismissively. We raised you. The least you can do is support us in our retirement. I took a sharp breath, feeling as if I'd been punched. Seriously? Even after saying my children weren't good enough for your Thanksgiving table, you expected me to keep paying for your luxuries? Do you hear yourself? Catherine let out a long, dramatic sigh. You know, Melissa, this is exactly why we don't like having difficult conversations with you. You always overreact. Overreact? I was done. You're right about one thing, I said, and my voice dangerously calm. I did cancel the card, and since we're having an honest conversation now, let me make one thing very clear. You will never see another cent from me, ever. Catherine gasped as if I had slapped her. Melissa, don't be ridiculous. And since we're talking now, I continued, don't expect Christmas presents, birthday presents, or anything else. You made your choice when you said my children weren't welcome, and now I'm making mine. Silence. Then in a voice colder than I'd ever heard from her, she said, You'll regret this. And she hung up. For a moment, I just stood there outside the bank, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. The kids were waiting in the seating area inside, their faces pressed against the glass door, watching me with concern. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and went back inside. Everything okay, Mommy? Sarah asked, her voice small. I knelt down to her level. Everything is perfect, sweetheart. Now, who wants that hot chocolate I promised? Their faces lit up, and as we walked to the cafe in the mall, Jake's small hand in mine and Sarah skipping ahead, I realized something. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was truly protecting my children, not just from strangers or accidents, but from the subtle emotional harm that had shaped my own childhood. That night, after the kids were in bed, I told David everything. $12,000? He repeated, incredulous. In 6 months, I nodded, still numb with shock. And when I confronted her, she acted like I was being unreasonable. Like I owed it to them. David ran a hand through his hair. This is beyond belief, Mel. It's fraud. I know, I said quietly. I've already filed a report with the bank, but I don't think I want to press criminal charges. I just want them out of our lives. He sat beside me on the sofa, taking my hand. I support whatever decision you make. But are you prepared for how ugly this might get? Your parents aren't used to being denied anything they want. I thought about it, remembering the cold fury in my mother's voice, the entitlement in her words. They've taken enough from me, David. My childhood, my self-confidence, years of emotional labor. And now they tried to take my financial security too. I'm done giving. I'm proud of you, he said, squeezing my hand. It's not easy to stand up to your parents, especially when they've conditioned you your whole life to seek their approval. I leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. I just keep thinking about Sarah and Jake. What would they learn if I let my parents treat them this way? That they're not worthy of love unless they meet some impossible standard? That it's okay for people to use them and discard them when they're inconvenient? I won't have them grow up feeling the way I did. David wrapped his arm around me. They won't. They have you as their mother. Social media attack 2 weeks later. 2 weeks passed without contact from my parents. I had blocked their numbers on my phone after receiving several manipulative texts, but otherwise, it had been blissfully quiet. I was just beginning to think they had finally accepted my decision when my phone buzzed with a text from my college friend, Tara. Melissa, have you seen what your mom posted? Call me ASAP. My stomach dropped. I immediately logged into Facebook, which I rarely used anymore except to keep up with distant friends, and there it was, a lengthy post from my mother that had already garnered dozens of sympathetic comments. With heavy hearts, Richard and I must share our heartbreak. After decades of love and support, our daughter has cruelly cut us off from her life and our beloved grandchildren. Despite the sacrifices we made, financing her education, supporting her career choices, always being there in times of need, she has chosen to abandon us in our golden years. Even more painful, she has made false accusations against us to financial institutions. For those who have asked how they can help, we've created this fundraiser to cover unexpected legal expenses. Attached to the post was a detailed invoice listing what they claimed to have spent raising me, everything from prenatal care to college tuition, totaling over $220,000. Below that was a link to a GoFundMe campaign titled Help Catherine and Richard Fight Parental Alienation. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the comments, dozens of sympathetic responses from their friends, distant relatives, and former colleagues, all expressing outrage at my ungrateful behavior. This can't be happening, I whispered, feeling physically ill. David looked over my shoulder, his expression darkening as he read. This is a new low, even for them. I couldn't speak. It wasn't just the audacity of the post, it was seeing my private family conflict laid bare for public consumption, twisted into a narrative that painted me as a villain and them as victims. It was the realization that my parents cared more about saving face than preserving any relationship with me or their grandchildren. What do I do? I asked, my voice small. Do I respond? Defend myself? David thought for a moment. Would that give you peace, or just drag you deeper into their game? I stared at the screen, at the growing list of comments condemning my heartless behavior. Then I closed the app. You're right. Engaging would only give them what they want, attention and drama. And it would make this public spectacle even more public. I put down my phone and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet street. The neighbors' houses were starting to display holiday decorations, twinkling lights and wreaths, inflatable snowmen on lawns. Our house was still undecorated, the Thanksgiving drama having dampened our usual enthusiasm for Christmas preparations. You know what? I said, turning to David with sudden determination. Let's decorate the house today. Let's make this Christmas special for Sarah and Jake. He looked surprised, but pleased. Really? I nodded firmly. My parents want me miserable and defensive. I won't give them that satisfaction. We're going to have the best holiday season ever, without their manipulation, without their judgment, without their shadows hanging over us. That afternoon, we pulled out the Christmas decorations from the attic. Sarah and Jake were ecstatic, running around with tinsel and ornaments, their laughter filling the house. We put on holiday music, made hot cocoa, and spent hours transforming our home into a winter wonderland. As I watched Jake carefully hang a handmade ornament on the tree, a messy but heartfelt creation from preschool, I felt a profound sense of clarity. This was what mattered. Not my parents' approval, not their public smear campaign, not the opinions of people who didn't know the truth. Just this, my children's joy, my husband's love, our life together. Later that night, I received texts from several close friends who had seen my mother's post. Each one offered support without even asking for my side of the story. Their unconditional belief in me was a stark contrast to the conditional love I'd grown up with, and it strengthened my resolve. I drafted a simple, private message to send to those friends. Thank you for your support. I've made the difficult decision to distance myself from my parents for the health and well-being of my family. I won't be engaging with their public statements, but please know how much your friendship means to me during this time. Then I deleted the Facebook app from my phone. Whatever storm my parents were trying to create, I wouldn't be caught in it. I had a family to protect and a holiday to celebrate. Thanksgiving Eve, the unexpected visit. The day before Thanksgiving arrived with a crisp chill in the air. Our house was filled with the aroma of baking pies. Pumpkin for David, apple for the kids, and pecan for me. I had spent the morning preparing as much as I could for tomorrow's feast. It wouldn't be the elaborate affair my mother would have hosted, but it would be filled with love and laughter, and that was all that mattered. Sarah was helping me crimp the edge of a pie crust, her small fingers carefully pressing the dough. Jake was supposed to be sorting cranberries, but was mostly just eating them, his lips already stained red. Mummy, will Grandma and Grandpa ever come to our house again? Sarah asked suddenly, her eyes serious. The question caught me off guard. I hadn't told the children everything, only that we wouldn't be seeing their grandparents for a while. I set down my rolling pin and knelt to her level. I don't know, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements that take time to work out. She nodded with the wisdom only a 7-year-old could possess. That's okay. I like our Thanksgiving better anyway. Grandma never let me help with the pies. My heart squeezed. Even in their young perceptions, my parents' rigid control had been evident. The doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. David was upstairs on a work call, so I wiped my hands on my apron and went to answer it, expecting the grocery delivery I'd ordered. Instead, I found my parents standing on the porch. Catherine was impeccably dressed in a camel-colored cashmere coat, her silver hair perfectly styled. Richard stood beside her in his navy wool overcoat, looking uncomfortable but resolute. Between them was a large, beautifully wrapped package with an elaborate bow. For a moment, I couldn't speak, shock freezing my thoughts. Melissa, darling, Catherine said, her voice carrying that false warmth I knew so well. We've come to make peace. I found my voice. What are you doing here? Catherine's smile didn't waver. It's Thanksgiving, dear. Family should be together at Thanksgiving. Richard held out the gift. For the children. Educational toys to help with their development. My fingers gripped the doorframe. The audacity was breathtaking, showing up unannounced after everything they'd done. Bringing educational toys as if my children needed fixing, acting as if a wrapped present could erase weeks of hurt. No thanks, I said flatly. Catherine's smile faltered. Melissa, don't be stubborn. Let's not ruin Thanksgiving over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? My blood boiled. You already ruined Thanksgiving when you told me my children weren't good enough for your table. Remember that? Her mouth opened, then closed. Richard sighed. Come on, Melissa. Let's just be a family again. I stared at them, feeling nothing but exhaustion. You don't want to be a family. I said quietly. You want me to go back to being useful. Their silence told me everything I needed to know. Behind me, I heard small footsteps. Mommy? Who's at the door? Sarah called. Before I could answer, Catherine peered past me, her face lighting up with that performative grandmotherly affection she only displayed when it suited her agenda. Sarah, darling, Grandma and Grandpa have come to visit. We've brought you a special gift. I stepped more firmly into the doorway, blocking her view. My children are not pawns in whatever game you're playing, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Take your gift and go. Catherine's expression hardened. Melissa, don't be selfish. Think about the children. I smiled coldly. I am thinking about the children. That's exactly why you're not in their lives anymore. Richard's jaw tightened. You really want to do this? I exhaled. I already did. And with that, I shut the door in their faces, turning the deadbolt with a decisive click. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in my life, I felt completely certain that I had done the right thing. I leaned against the door, taking deep breaths to calm myself. I exhaled. I already did. And with that, I shut the door in their faces, turning the deadbolt with a decisive click. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in my life, I felt completely certain that I had done the right thing. I leaned against the door, taking deep breaths to calm myself. Mommy? Sarah's voice was small. She stood in the hallway, Jake peeking out from behind her, both of their faces confused and concerned. I knelt down, opening my arms. Come here, you two. They rushed into my embrace, and I held them tightly, breathing in the scent of cranberries and pie dough that clung to their clothes. Was that Grandma and Grandpa? Jake asked. I nodded, pulling back to look at their faces. Yes, it was. They wanted to visit, but today isn't a good day. Were they mad? Sarah's perceptive eyes searched mine. They were, I admitted, choosing honesty over evasion. But not because of anything you did. Grown-up problems are complicated sometimes. Like when I'm mad at Tyler because he always gets to be team captain at school? Jake offered. I smiled, grateful for the simple wisdom of children. Something like that. Now, who wants to finish those pies? We have a big day tomorrow. We returned to the kitchen, and though I could feel a slight shadow over the cheerful atmosphere, the children quickly returned to their tasks, their resilience a lesson to me. Later that night, after they were tucked into bed, David found me sitting alone in the dark living room. They came here, I said before he could ask, with an educational gift for the children. He sat beside me, his weight on the couch a comforting presence. What did you do? I sent them away. Told them the children weren't pawns in their game. I turned to him, my eyes burning with unshed tears. Am I wrong, David? Am I denying my children a relationship with their grandparents out of stubbornness? He took my hand, his expression serious. Mel, what kind of relationship would it be? One where they're constantly judged, made to feel inadequate, used as tools in your parents' manipulation? That's not love. I nodded slowly. I keep thinking about my childhood, how I never felt good enough, how I was always striving for approval that never came. I don't want that for them. Then you've made the right choice. He pulled me close. It's not easy, but it's right. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in weeks, the weight of decades of seeking approval finally beginning to lift from my shoulders. Holiday concert, the public conference 2 weeks before Christmas, Sarah's school held their annual holiday concert. She had been practicing her solo for weeks, a verse of Silent Night that she would sing while holding a candle. The morning of the concert, she was a bundle of nerves and excitement, practicing in front of the bathroom mirror as she brushed her teeth. You're going to be wonderful, I assured her, helping her into the white dress we'd chosen for the occasion. Will Daddy record it so Jake can watch when he's older? She asked, her eyes bright. I nodded, my heart swelling with love for this thoughtful child who always considered her younger brother. Absolutely. And we'll sit right in the front so you can see us. The elementary school auditorium was packed when we arrived, parents clutching programs and shifting in uncomfortable folding chairs. Jake was fidgety beside me, But David had come prepared with small, quiet toys to keep him occupied. As the lights dimmed and the first group of children filed onto the stage, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I froze. 4 rows behind us sat my parents, alongside Michael, Jennifer, and their twins. Catherine caught my eye and gave a small, triumphant smile. My stomach dropped. They had come to Sarah's concert, something they had never done before, now, when I had explicitly cut contact. This wasn't about supporting Sarah. This was about asserting control, about showing me they could insert themselves into my life whenever they chose. "What is it?" David whispered, noticing my tension. "They're here," I managed, not turning around. "All of them." His jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Ignore them. This is Sarah's night." I nodded, focusing on the stage where the kindergartners were finishing their song. Sarah's class would be next. I wouldn't let my parents ruin this moment for her. When Sarah stepped forward for her solo, her small face solemn in the glow of the electric candle she held, I felt tears spring to my eyes. Her clear, sweet voice filled the auditorium, and for those perfect moments, nothing else existed, not my parents, not our conflict, just my daughter's voice and the overwhelming love I felt for her. The audience burst into applause when she finished, and I saw her scan the crowd, her face lighting up when she spotted us. I clapped until my hands hurt, pride bursting in my chest. After the concert, families gathered in the school gym for cookies and punch. Sarah rushed to us, still in her concert dress, her face flushed with excitement. "Did you see me? Did you hear me?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. "You were magnificent," David said, sweeping her into a hug. "The best singer in the whole concert," Jake added solemnly, offering her a slightly squashed cookie he'd been saving. I knelt to embrace her, whispering how proud I was when I felt the atmosphere change. Looking up, I saw my parents approaching, flanked by Michael and Jennifer. The twins trailed behind, looking bored. I stood, positioning myself slightly in front of my children. David moved to my side, his presence solid and reassuring. "That was quite a performance," Catherine said, her voice carrying just the right note of grandmotherly pride for anyone who might be listening. "Sarah, darling, you have such a pretty voice." Sarah, unaware of the tension, beamed. "Thank you, Grandma." "We need to talk, Melissa," my father said, his voice low but firm. "Not here," I replied, equally firm. "This is Sarah's night." Catherine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We just want a moment with our grandchildren." "Surely you won't deny us that in public." The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. "Create a scene at my daughter's school concert? Force me to either concede or look like the villain?" It was classic Catherine. "Actually, we're just leaving," I said pleasantly. "Sarah has school tomorrow." Catherine's facade cracked slightly. "This is ridiculous, Melissa. You can't keep cutting us off from our grandchildren. We have rights." A cold feeling spread through me. "Rights?" Michael stepped forward, his lawyer persona in full display. "Mom and Dad have been talking to an attorney about grandparents' rights. They're concerned about the children's well-being." I felt my pulse pound in my throat. "What are you trying to say?" Richard cleared his throat. "We've been looking into our legal options. Grandparents have visitation rights in this state. We're only thinking of what's best for Sarah and Jake." For a moment, all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Then I laughed. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was loud and sharp. Several nearby parents glanced our way. "Is something funny?" Michael asked, his face tightening. "Absolutely," I said, reaching into my purse. I pulled out my phone. "You want to talk legal? Let's talk legal." I pulled up a recording app and hit play. My mother's voice filled the air. "Don't act like this is some big betrayal. We raised you. The least you can do is support us in our retirement." I stopped the recording and swiped to a photo of my credit card statement, highlighting the unauthorized charges. "I've been documenting everything. Every text, every voicemail, every fraudulent charge. I have statements from my bank confirming unauthorized use of my credit card. I have your public social media posts attempting to extort money from me by painting me as an ungrateful daughter. Their faces paled. So please, take me to court. Explain to a judge how you excluded my children from family gatherings because they weren't exemplary enough. Explain the fraud. Explain the public humiliation. See how that works out for your grandparents' rights case. Catherine's lips pressed into a thin line. You're being unreasonable. I smiled, a genuine smile that felt like freedom. No, Mom. I'm finally being smart. I turned to my children, who were watching with confusion. Time to go, sweethearts. Say goodbye. As we walked away, I heard Jennifer mutter to Michael, I told you this was a bad idea. In the car, Sarah was unusually quiet. Finally, she asked, Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? I exchanged a glance with David in the rearview mirror, then turned to face my children. Grandma and Grandpa are mad at me, not you. They and I have very different ideas about how to treat people. Is that why we don't see them anymore? She persisted. I nodded, choosing my words carefully. Yes. Sometimes, even when we love people, we need to keep our distance from them if they don't treat us with respect. Jake, who had been listening intently, piped up. Like when Emma pulled my hair at preschool and the teacher said I should play with someone else, I smiled at his simple but accurate parallel. Exactly like that. As we drove home through streets decorated with holiday lights, I felt strangely at peace. The confrontation I had dreaded had come and gone, and I had stood my ground. More importantly, I had shown my children that love shouldn't come with conditions, that respecting yourself was as important as respecting others. The specter of my parents' threatened legal action still loomed, but in my heart, I knew they wouldn't follow through. Their leverage had always been emotional manipulation, not facts. And faced with the facts, they had no case. Legal action, the restraining order, 2 days after the concert confrontation, a certified letter arrived from a law firm representing my parents. It detailed their intent to seek grandparental visitation rights, citing their deep concern for the educational and social development of the children and my irrational estrangement. David found me at the kitchen table, staring at the document, a cold fury building inside me. Is that what I think it is? He asked, setting down his coffee. I handed him the letter without a word. As he read it, his expression darkened. This is harassment, he said finally. Using legal intimidation to force their way back into our lives after everything they've done. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. They've always used whatever tools they had to control me, emotional manipulation, financial leverage, and now the legal system. But this time, they've miscalculated. What do you want to do? I met his gaze, my decision already made. I want to file for a restraining order. Not just against them, but against Michael too. I want this to end permanently. David nodded, completely supportive. I'll call Mark. Mark was a friend of his from architecture school who had become a family law attorney. 3 days later, we sat in Mark's office, laying out the entire situation, the Thanksgiving exclusion, the credit card fraud, the public social media campaign, the ambush at the school concert, and now the legal threat. Mark listened intently, taking detailed notes, his expression becoming increasingly grave. Based on what you've told me, they've engaged in harassment, financial abuse, and attempted extortion. Their grandparent rights case is exceptionally weak, especially given the documented fraud and the fact that you haven't prevented contact until their behavior became harmful. So what do we do? I asked. We file for a restraining order on the grounds of harassment and financial abuse. We counterfile a civil suit for the credit card fraud, which could potentially lead to criminal charges, though that would be up to the prosecutors. And we issue a cease and desist regarding the social media campaign. I hesitated, the reality of what I was doing, legally cutting my parents from my life, hitting me with full force. Is this too extreme? Mark looked at me kindly. Melissa, what they've done is extreme. You're simply protecting yourself and your family from further harm. And so began the legal process that would finally sever my ties with my parents. The restraining order was granted relatively quickly, given the evidence we presented. The civil suit took longer, but eventually, we reached a settlement. My parents agreed to repay the fraudulent charges in full, plus damages, and to cease all public and private harassment. Michael, faced with potential accessory charges for his role in the financial fraud, distanced himself from our parents' legal battle. The last I heard, Jennifer had taken the twins and moved back to her parents' home in Chicago, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Throughout it all, David was my rock, handling the logistics when I felt overwhelmed, reminding me why we were fighting when I wavered, and always putting our children first. The final hearing was scheduled for early January. As I prepared to testify, I found myself revisiting memories of my childhood, searching for the good moments, the times when I had felt genuinely loved. There were some, scattered like rare jewels throughout my past. My father teaching me to ride a bike, my mother applauding at a school play, family vacations where, for brief moments, the pressure to perform had lifted. But these memories were overwhelmed by the countless instances of criticism, comparison, and conditional approval. The message had always been clear. I was loved when I was useful, when I met their standards, when I didn't challenge their narrative. In the courtroom, facing them across the polished wooden table, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sadness for what could have been, for the loving grandparents my children would never know, for the supportive parents I had always longed for. When the judge granted the permanent restraining order, my mother wept silently, her perfectly manicured hand covering her mouth. My father stared straight ahead, his face impassive. They didn't look at me as they left the courtroom, and I realized this was truly the end. Outside, in the bright January sunshine, David took my hand. You okay? I took a deep breath, looking up at the clear blue sky. I will be. Beach vacation 1 year later. The summer sun beat down on the white sand beach, warming my skin as I lounged in a beach chair. Before me stretched the Atlantic Ocean, its waves rolling gently onto the shore. Sarah and Jake were at the water's edge, building an elaborate sandcastle with David, their laughter carrying on the sea breeze. It had been almost a year since the court hearing, a year of rebuilding our lives without the shadow of my parents' toxicity. The first few months had been challenging, explaining to the children in age-appropriate ways why they wouldn't see their grandparents anymore, fielding questions from well-meaning friends, navigating holidays without the weight of familial expectations. But with each passing month, it had gotten easier. Sarah had blossomed in her dance classes, no longer anxious about performing perfectly for critical eyes. Jake had remained his cheerful, energetic self, but with a new confidence in expressing his thoughts and feelings. And I had finally begun to silence the internal critic that had been my mother's voice for so long. I closed my eyes, soaking in the warmth and peace of the moment, when a voice pulled me back to reality. Melissa? I opened my eyes, shielding them against the sun. Standing before me was a man I barely recognized, gaunt, gray, his expensive clothes replaced by worn khakis and a faded polo shirt. But the eyes were unmistakable. Michael, I said, sitting up straighter. My brother shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward my family at the shoreline. I didn't know you'd be here. Jennifer's parents have a house nearby. I'm visiting the twins. I nodded, unsure what to say. The restraining order had not included Michael after he withdrew his support from our parents' legal action, but we hadn't spoken since the court case. After an awkward silence, he spoke again. Can we talk? Just for a minute? I hesitated, then gestured to the empty chair beside me. He sat down heavily, staring out at the ocean. How are they? I finally asked. Michael's face tightened. Not good. Dad had a minor heart attack 3 months ago. The stress of everything. And Mom staying with her sister. Their house was foreclosed on. I absorbed this information with a strange detachment. And you? He gave a humorless laugh. Divorced. Jennifer took the twins back to Chicago. I see them once a month. Lost my partnership at the firm. Turns out being associated with an attempted fraud case isn't great for business. I said nothing, watching David help Jake balance a seashell on the highest tower of their sandcastle. I'm sorry, Michael said suddenly. For everything. For not standing up to them, for taking their side, for always being the favorite at your expense. I turned to look at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. You know, I used to envy you, he continued. You had this real life, a career you actually enjoyed, a husband who loves you, kids who are allowed to be kids. All I had was the appearance of success and parents who only approved of me because I did exactly what they wanted. And look where that got us both, I said softly. He nodded, running a hand through his graying hair. They're still talking about the lawsuit, still convinced they can overturn the restraining order. I sighed. Some people never change. No, he agreed. They don't. He stood up, brushing sand from his pants. I should go. The twins are waiting at the house. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Michael. He paused, looking back. Take care of yourself, I said, meaning it. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You too, Mel. I watched him walk away, a solitary figure against the bright beach, and felt the last vestiges of anger toward him dissolve. He had been as much a victim of our parents' toxic expectations as I had been, just in a different way. When David and the children returned from their sandcastle building, Jake immediately crawled into my lap, sandy and wet. Who was that man? He asked, his eyes curious. I smoothed his damp hair. That was your Uncle Michael. Sarah looked surprised. The one from the concert? Why didn't he come say hi to us? I chose my words carefully. Sometimes, when grown-ups have disagreements, it takes time to figure out how to be around each other again. David caught my eye over Sarah's head, his expression questioning. I gave a small nod to indicate I was okay. That evening, as we sat on the balcony of our rental cottage watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, David brought up the encounter. Are you all right? He asked. Seeing Michael must have been unexpected. I considered the question, taking a sip of my wine. I thought seeing him would bring back all the anger, all the hurt. But honestly, I just felt sad. Sad for what could have been. Sad for what he's lost. Sad that my parents are still the same people they've always been. And your parents? How do you feel about what's happened to them? I watched as Sarah and Jake chased each other on the beach below, their silhouettes dark against the glowing sky. I don't wish them ill, but I also don't regret my decision. They made their choices, and these are the consequences. David took my hand. You know, when we first met, you were always seeking approval from your boss, from your friends, especially from your parents. It's been amazing to watch you find your voice, to see you stand up for yourself and our children. I squeezed his hand, grateful beyond words for his unwavering support. It wasn't easy. There are still days when I hear my mother's critical voice in my head, when I doubt myself. But then I look at Sarah and Jake, and I remember why it was worth it. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the horizon, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. The journey had been painful, the loss is real. But in cutting ties with the toxicity of my past, I had freed not only myself, but my children from the cycle of conditional love and emotional manipulation that had defined my childhood. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them? David asked softly. I considered this, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Not unless they truly change. And people like my parents rarely do. Later that night, as I checked on the children before bed, I found them both sleeping peacefully, their faces slack with innocent dreams. Standing in the doorway, I made a silent promise to them that they would always know they were loved unconditionally, that their worth wasn't measured by achievement or compliance, that home would always be a place of acceptance and joy. And for the first time in my life, I made the same promise to myself. Epilogue: a home. The first hints of spring were visible in our garden, crocuses pushing through the soil, buds forming on the dogwood tree. I sat on the back porch, a manuscript from work in my lap, though my attention was more on Sarah and Jake playing in the yard than on the words before me. Sarah, now 8, was teaching Jake a new dance routine she'd created, their movements exuberant if not entirely coordinated. They had both thrived in the year since we'd cut ties with my parents, Sarah more confident in her creativity, Jake more expressive with his thoughts and feelings. The doorbell rang, and David went to answer it while I continued watching the children. A few minutes later, he joined me on the porch, holding a large manila envelope. Certified mail, he said, handing it to me. From your brother's law firm. I stiffened, the peaceful mood broken. We hadn't heard from Michael since the beach encounter 6 months ago. What now? With hesitant fingers, I opened the envelope and pulled out a letter on official letterhead, along with several legal documents. As I read, my eyes widened in disbelief. "What is it?" David asked, concern in his voice. It's, it's from Michael. He's sending me this as a courtesy before it becomes public record. I looked up at David, still processing. My parents have been charged with financial fraud. Not just against me, apparently. They've been running a scheme for years, borrowing money from friends and family with no intention of repaying. David sat down beside me. That's, wow. I continued reading. The prosecutor found evidence when they investigated our case. Michael says he's cooperating with the authorities. I turned to the next page. And there's more. He's filed for full custody of the twins. Says Jennifer's been keeping them from him and that he wants to break the cycle of toxic parenting. Do you think he means it? David asked. I thought of Michael on the beach, the regret in his eyes, the acknowledgement of our parents' destructive influence. I think he might. He's included his new address and phone number. Says if we're ever ready, he'd like the cousins to know each other. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the children play. What do you want to do? David finally asked. I folded the letter carefully, returning it to the envelope. Nothing, for now. But maybe someday when the wounds aren't so fresh. The kids deserve to know their cousins. He nodded, understanding as always. And your parents? I shook my head. That chapter is closed. Whatever happens to them now, it's the result of their own choices. As if sensing the serious turn of our conversation, Sarah and Jake bounded onto the porch, breathless from their dance. Mom, Dad, watch our new routine, Sarah exclaimed, pulling Jake into position. We set aside the letter, giving them our full attention as they performed their made-up dance, complete with dramatic twirls and a slightly wobbly finale. That was wonderful. I applauded, genuinely delighted by their joy and creativity. As they bowed with exaggerated formality, I caught David's eye and saw in his smile the same contentment I felt. This was what mattered. These moments, this love, this family we had built. Later, as I tucked the children into bed, Sarah asked a question that caught me off guard. Mom, do you miss Grandma and Grandpa? I sat on the edge of her bed, considering how to answer truthfully without burdening her. I miss the idea of what grandparents should be, I said carefully. I miss having a big family for you and Jake. But I don't miss the way they made us feel. She nodded, thoughtful beyond her years. I think I understand. It's like when I had to quit Ms. Peterson's dance class because she always made me feel bad, even though I love dancing. That's exactly right, I said, amazed by her insight. Sometimes we have to let go of things or people that hurt us, even if there are parts we miss. I'm glad we have our family, she said, snuggling under her covers. Just us. It's better this way. I kissed her forehead. Much better. After both children were asleep, I found David in our bedroom, already changed for the night. I handed him Michael's letter, which I'd been carrying since receiving it. I think I want to respond, I said. Not now, but soon. Tell him I appreciate the warning about the charges. Maybe. Maybe leave the door open a crack. David nodded. I think that's wise. People can change. Some people, I amended, thinking of my parents. He pulled me into an embrace. You've changed, he pointed out. The Melissa I met 15 years ago would never have stood up to your parents the way you did. That was different. I changed to protect my children, to break a cycle. And maybe that's what Michael's trying to do too. I considered this possibility as we prepared for bed. Perhaps my brother, having lost everything that our parents valued, status, money, the perfect family image, had finally found the courage to become his authentic self, just as I had. That night, as David slept beside me, I found myself thinking of the family we had chosen rather than the one we were born into. Our friends who had supported us unconditionally. David's parents, who had always treated me and the children with genuine love and acceptance. The community we had built around us. Teachers who nurtured our children's unique qualities. Neighbors who had become like extended family. Colleagues who respected my work and my boundaries. I realized that in losing my parents, I hadn't lost family, I had gained the freedom to recognize the true meaning of that word. Family wasn't defined by blood or obligation. It was defined by love, by respect, by the safety to be your authentic self without fear of rejection. As I drifted towards sleep, I felt a profound gratitude wash over me. The journey had been painful, the loss is real. But what we had gained, authentic relationships, emotional freedom, the breaking of a toxic cycle, was immeasurably more valuable. Our children would grow up knowing they were loved unconditionally. They would understand that respect was a two-way street, that healthy relationships had boundaries, that their worth wasn't measured by achievement or compliance. They would never know the anxiety of walking on eggshells, the constant striving for approval that always remained just out of reach. And in giving them this gift, I had finally given it to myself as well.